Welcome to the design portion of this series where drawing from our wireframe will produce the mock-up for our website. Now with such a simple layout we could probably get away with designing right in the browser, and this has its own set of advantages. But as a matter of practice we're going to get started by opening up Photoshop and dragging our browser shot found in the exercise files into the program. And as we're going to be digitizing our wireframe, it's also going to be helpful to bring that up so that we can reference it throughout the exercise. Now our site is going to measure 1000 pixels wide, and we can begin by setting some guides in place to help with the execution of our design. To begin, let's go up to View, and we're going to want to make sure that we have both extras and rulers turned on. We can then select the entirety of our document using Command A, and using the Move tool, we can click and drag in these ruler margins to set a guide in place across the center of the horizontal axis. Now, as we mentioned that the width for our design is going to be 1000 pixels wide, we're going to use the Marquee tool to create a container for our website. So let's create a new layer. And selecting the Marquee tool, we'll change the style to Fixed Size, and we're then going to type in a width of 1000 pixels, and leaving the height variable, we'll start with 700. Let's next bring up the Paint Bucket tool, and we can now fill in our container, choosing white for this area of the page. We'll also take this opportunity to center our selection and drop some guides in place to better define this feature. In clearing our selection, we can then jump over to our layers, and as we want to stay semantic with our naming, we're going to call this container, as it's going to contain all of the contents for our page. With that, it's now time to take a look at our wireframe to better assess what we have going on inside the container. Beginning with the header portion of our website, this area is composed of both navigation and the header banner. So moving back to our mockup, we're going to bring up the text tool, and starting a new layer, we'll adjust our font color to black and can populate this area with our placeholder links, adding in vertical bars every 4 spaces or so. Calling this layer Nav, we'll next create a new layer and appropriately name it Banner. We're now going to create our banner by using the Marquee tool to draw a rough selection. And once we're happy with the area, we can bring up the Paint Bucket tool to fill in a color. Keeping up with our guides, we're then going to want to drop another in place at the baseline of our banner layer, marking the end of our header. We can then jump back to the wireframe to examine the main section of our page. You'll note we have this primary content area that takes up about 2/3 of the page. Flanking this is a complementary sidebar, taking up the other third. So let's keep things simple, and using 1000 pixels as our width, we're going to break that down into 65% for our main container. To do that, we'll start a new layer named Content, and using the Marquee tool, we'll make a fixed size selection of 650 pixels. Filling our selection with white, we can then move our content area into place and use a few guides to define the feature and help us with our sidebar position. So where we're using 65% or 650 pixels for the primary content area, we're going to use 30% or 300 pixels for the sidebar. Now you'll note there's 5% of space missing, and that's going to be used as a margin separating the two areas. So following the same process, we'll make a new layer named Sidebar, and we can then use the Marquee tool to make a fixed size selection of 300 pixels. Filling the area with white, we can place our sidebar and use a guide to mark the border of this area. Let's then clear our selection and now take another look at our wireframe. Focusing on the primary content area, this template provides a title, followed by a post stream composed of article excerpts. So let's move back over to the mockup, and using the text tool, we'll set our font color to black, and since this is the main heading for our page, we'll increase the size to 24. Typing in our title, we can then set a guide to define the baseline of our heading, and as is present in our wireframe, we're going to want to create that horizontal line. So let's create a new layer titled Horizontal Line, and using the pencil tool with a 1 pixel selection, we can set the foreground color to black and zoom in a bit on our workspace. We'll then click at the corner of our guides, and holding down Shift, we can click on the other side of our primary content area to create a straight line and better illustrate that break in our page. Zooming out, we now have our page title in place and can begin work on our article excerpts. Using the text tool, we'll use the remainder of our primary content area for our selection, and we're going to reset the font size to 16 pixels and copy and paste some text that I prepared in advance. We can then make a few adjustments, increasing the font size on the article titles, and we'll also set the Read More links as blue. With our articles in place, we'll name the layer, and we can head back over to our wireframe, where it's now time to build the sidebar for our page. So let's use the text tool to create a new layer over our sidebar area, and making sure our font color is set as black, we'll copy and paste some sidebar content into place. We can then make an adjustment to our widget title's font size, and make sure it's aligned with that of our primary content area. Naming our widget, we'll also take a moment to duplicate our horizontal line and position the new break in place under that of our widget title. After resizing the element, our sidebar is complete, and we'll once again assess our wireframe. You'll note that the last section of our page is that of the footer, and this area is marked by a horizontal line and will house our content information. So using the same process as before, we'll duplicate a horizontal line and position it to extend across the bottom of our main section. Next, we can start a new text layer, and resetting our font size to 16, we'll input our copyright information and name this layer Copyright. With our footer in place, we can now review our mockup as it currently sits, and to get a better rendering of our page, we'll turn off extras for a nice preview of our website. And if we're happy with the mockup, it's time to save. We're going to want to save two formats, both a Photoshop document so that we can edit our mockup at a later time should we need to revisit or amend any items. And we're also going to want to save a PNG, as this will allow us to bring up a quick preview that we're going to use for the next portions of this series. In opening our mockup side by side with that of the wireframe, we can really see how we've transitioned from a simple wireframe to that of a web-ready mockup. For Code on Camera, I'm Kevin Lasht.